This is Lightbox Studios on Project Bovine. I'm project lead of Project Bovine. I'm Richard Hall. And here we have Steve, who is our lead.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm the lead coder for this game.
We have Will.
Off you go.
I'm Will. I'm lead animator.
Okay. We have Leon.
Hi, I'm Liam and I'm the 3D character modeler.
We also have Luke.
Hi, I'm Luke and I'm the lead concept artist.
And Michael.
Alright, I'm Mike, I'm lead texture artist for Project Bovine.
And finally we have Harry.
Hi, I'm Harry. I'm lead 3D artist for Project Bovine.
Now, our unique selling point for our game is that it's a mixed genre of both Western and sci-fi, while also incorporating aspects of horror. And we would like to bring those genres together in this third-person / first-person horror game, and we would like to bring those audiences from those specific genres together. We also included a lot of original designs that we've also incorporated into the concept art and stuff like that, and so, which we'll talk about in a minute. Michael's going to talk about the narrative of the game.
So, first of all, what we wanted. We had an ambitious target at the start of January. A tutorial area full of both friendly and hostile AI, with a multiple choice dialogue, base building, a fully fledged landscape, and an interactive narrative. We would have tribal factions, some allies, some enemies, that would patrol around the jungle and provide a sudden jump scare as the player attempts to navigate the dark, vast forest city. We set a target to create all the characters, enemies, allies, and local wildlife within the 3 to 4 months we had to work with. What we couldn't do, we unfortunately were a bit too ambitious, not that much, but a bit too. However, we did make good progress. Most of the primary level is complete, as well as the secondary sewer level. Some changes to AI and mechanics do need to be made, and that will be done by our mechanics guys. So the environment and atmosphere. The environment the player faces is a dark, mysterious alien world, with jungles and ruins of a glorious civilization prior, that scatter all over the place. Scatter all over the world. The mood is very tense and very dreary. The player may feel a sense of impending doom, or like they're being constantly watched. This is deliberate and is to exemplify the horror aspect of the game. So the play area is 2 levels. It is a jungle tutorial level where the player will learn the aspects of the game, learn what it's about, discover what the basic narrative is about. And the second one is a sewer level, which is more underground, kind of dark, much more horror, much more adrenaline-based experience. We have many references to the story in the game through the models. So we have an escape pod, which is where the player will start, and it is where the narrative is based around, and how the player will eventually leave the planet. And we have multiple different signs and symbols and posters around that display different.
We have basically environmental storytelling.
Yes.
Cool. Is Luke going to talk about our concept art?
Yes. said, I am the concept artist for this game at the moment, and just some of the conceptual work's been going through. We had different terrains, different areas that we were going to have at the start of the game. We had to scale it down, as said before, because the map itself is just too large and the workload would have been too much. I'll just go through some now.
It's hard to see, but
Yeah.
it's there.
On the right hand side we've got more of the doom and gloom horror aspect of the game, where it's all been darkened out and there's vegetation across the floor showing it has been overrun by nature itself. And this is just to give off a general vibe and feel for the game, so the modelers and everyone else that's participating or crafting assets for the game knows what kind of aspect they need to follow. On the other side, it's more of a desert landscape. This was just to give a feel if we would continue the game, expand into other areas, and of course we wanted to keep in touch with the narrative we already have, but this generally just gives the impact and shows the whole landscape and what we wanted to put inside of it. This one's more of my favourite. At the minute it has no colour in, but this is just to show the impact, and it could be used in an historical way to show the breakdown of civilization and how it impacted it. I've highlighted a few of the key figures, and they're meant to be the characters inside the game. Obviously just wandering around, going looking for crafting items and other things that they can put together to build resources at the camp and otherwise. Thanks to one of our 3D modelers, they built some huts, and over here I've literally just gone over them with some simple textures to give a slight feel for the game and what we want to introduce on a mass scale, so that the characters or enemies, you know where they reside and what kind of habitat they will be living in. This one's more of an open area sort of thing. It is a complete product at the moment, but it does show down broken vehicles, more destroyed buildings and pavements, and of course the contrast is quite nice between the things at the forefront and in the background. Of course you can see nature has overrun most of it, so it does give off a sense that time has passed considerably since anyone has been there to maintain it. This one was more of an experimental sort. I wanted to go with a toxic pool or a wasteland sort, so that the bovine would be able to drink from here, and any creatures that were going through, like the docile ones we had planned at the start. Although it is surrounded on all sides, which gives more of an action feel to the game if you were surrounded by enemies and you were just being pounced on, really. These were the tribal character designs I came up with. You've got the front and the front for the female as well. Obviously you wanted to have a multi-variation, and we wanted different tribes at the same time. But this is just generalised to show how rough and destroyed the clothing were, and as well as their skin types because of the mutations and that. This is another one. This was for the later stages. Obviously I wanted to create more enemies and get more variants inside the game for them to be able to hunt them down and perhaps just have a bit more excitement during the game. And I'll be handing over to the player character features. Who's doing that?
Yep, that is Will, who's going to talk about all the aspects related to the player character.
With the player character, we got all of the basic movement features implemented, so like you're walking, running, sprinting, and in all directions. But when it came to the shooting and most of the other more advanced features, we didn't get a lot of the animations implemented for them, because it was either bugging the entire game out, or we didn't get time to add the animations in. And we wanted to also add a third-person view in the beginning, but because of the mode switching, it required more models and animations, so we ended up scrapping the idea. So we only ended up with a third-person character reflections than having it actually visible to the player. This was the same with the harvesting, and where we did get harvesting into the game, but it didn't require any of the animations. so we didn't add them to save on time. Right. There we go. So, quick breakdown of some features for the character.
It's hard to see, but
Rich, well, you gave this side control that so you don't have to get in the way.
yeah, sure.
Probably change the slide now as well.
Oh, yeah? Who you got to talk about?
Let's just try that.
Right, these are all the aspects of the enemy character.
With the enemy character, we've got a lot of the features we wanted for the advanced enemy character in, so like the taking cover, shooting from cover, and so on. But with the shooting from cover, the terrain tended to break the cover, so it would move to a part that wasn't actually covered and then wouldn't shoot. And it tended to make all of the AI of the same class just move to the same spot. Then we wanted to also have some more enemies as well, so like the charging enemy and the melee enemy. So charging enemy would have run straight up to the player and shot, but with the time crunch we didn't get a chance to implement the two of them.
Next slide. Yeah, well, there we go.
It's a quick video of the AI. You can see where the terrain broke the actual pathing for it, where they all bunched up into one spot. They do try and take cover. They do crouch and they do shoot at you.
Next slide.
Yep.
Cool. There we go.
Back to the animations. Which, again, I did get most of the way to starting the first-person animations, but it wouldn't export. So after a lot of trial and error to get it to work, it wouldn't. So we ended up not implementing it. A lot of the animations are third-person animations with the camera set up to look first-person. So, all of those animations were done using Mixamo. With the first-person animations, we also wanted to animate a lot of the weapons, so getting the reload, ADS, in-dash sight, and any other features we wanted for the weapons as well. But with the issues we had with the first-person animation for the arms, we didn't end up doing that. And all of the enemy animations are the same as the third-person animations we used for the player character. So it's all Mixamo animations set up to work on the other on the enemies. We did also want to add in animals as well with animations, but obviously they didn't get added in. Any of the other animations, so any environmental animations and so on, also didn't happen.
Cool. This is Steve. He's going to talk about the game mechanics that did get implemented and the aspects that didn't get implemented. So,
Right, as you can see from the list there, we was pretty ambitious on the amount of mechanics and features we wanted to have in the game. So on the left here you've got all the ones that made it. On the right you've got the ones that didn't. So things like hunting, chopping trees, gathering wood. So some of those got cut down to literally just instead of chopping the tree and stuff like that, it was just like a pile of wood on the floor that you can pick up. So loads of the animations and stuff like that got took out just for time management really. What else? Yeah, with the companions, they're in the game, they follow you, they shoot, they just don't actually have weapons attached to them that they actually fire from, they're still just using line traces.
next slide.
Yeah, please.
Loot chest.
Yeah, so this is a quick video of the loot chest. This is like also editable, so basically you can set this up, place them around wherever you want with all different assets in there. I've used that mainly as a developer debugger, so I can grab the resources needed for the camping stuff. So all worked fine. The only issue I had was the tooltip. If you have the tooltip highlighted while you exit the window, the tooltip will stay up on the screen, but I couldn't find a way of fixing that.
Cool. Next slide. There we go.
Yeah. So that loot chest was linked also to the inventory system here. Just pops up quickly. Basically, it's all calibrated using the component attached to the player. So whatever you pick up will add to it. If it's stackable, it'll stack, and if it's just like one item, like these front two here, they won't stack. It'll just start a new slot. And when these stacks get full, it'll create a new slot and start building up the slot again.
Adding on to it, the UI that was displayed on there was made in Photoshop and incorporated most of the assets, including the weapons, items that you can pick up, and resources.
It's like 3D assets put into a 2D picture, basically.
Yeah. There you go.
So in the last presentation, I showed the actual tutorial for this scanning system. Unfortunately for me, from my side of things, coding this in wasn't as simple as following the guide, because the guide went so far and then left it. So when you did this scan by pushing the scan button, that item would stay lit up permanently. And I didn't know how to fix that at first, but with a bit of trial and error, I managed to get the code in to stop it from doing that. So it's like yellow for interactables, red for enemies, and green for friendlies, basically. In the final one that we've got at the moment, I still need to add some of the assets with the correct colours, because I didn't have time to do it to all the assets, but if I had a bit more time, all assets would light up in the correct colours. Next one, please.
Yeah, sure.
So this one was pretty similar. Basically, I followed the guide. The guide itself went a bit more in detail, where you could actually rotate the items and place them down. But I wanted to keep it nice and simple, because building wasn't the main focus of our game. It was just one of these extra things that got put in just to tick a box, basically, for myself, to learn a bit more coding. So the way I did it is I set it up so it's the holographic colour, and then when you click on it, it does an inventory check to make sure that you've got the items. If you haven't got the items, it'll glow red. If you do have the items, it'll glow green. Once you've got the items and you click like the OK button, it just changes the textures to the correct textures. With the guns themselves, not only do they change textures, it will also activate the shooting and firing mechanics using the boolean.
Adding on to that, the base building mechanic is exclusive to the tutorial zone, so the player can only build in certain specific areas, as opposed to being able to build around the entire map.
Yeah.
So these are dedicated areas.
And if we were to build the full game, there'd be one of these zones in each zone. You want the camping area in each zone, and that would be used as the checkpoint, basically.
Pretty much.
Next slide.
So the companion system, this is the dialogue. This is also linked to the companion system as well. To do the dialogue system, basically I set it up using a behaviour tree. So like it'll go down through set paths, and then using the index value to decide on which answer you've picked on. So depending on your answer, it'll go down that different branch of the tree. To get them to follow you like that person just there did through the companion system was very tricky. It was having lots of issues doing the call to or cast to feature to the actual companion. So it took me about a week or so to figure out how to actually get them to stop just standing there and do the code I actually typed in. But after a bit of trial and error and a few booleans, I managed to get the checks to work. The only thing I couldn't do, I don't know why it wouldn't work, because normally you should be able to despawn and spawn something quite simply. But through the behaviour tree, trying to do it through that, I couldn't get them to spawn back at the camp, and that was one of the features we wanted. So if you didn't want them in your party at that time, for them to spawn back at the base, and then you could like interact with them later and pick them up again. But the following they'll shoot the enemy and stuff like that and just follow you. If you get too far away from the companion, if they're like in a fight or something and you run away, they'll break combat and come back to you. Yeah, next one.
Yeah, the dialogue that you see on screen as well was written by the narrative designer Michael, who wrote dialogue for all of the companions as well. So, yeah.
So this is just a simple bit of code, this one is. This is just using the game mode to store the data ID for each of the doors. So when you come up to this door, there's a little timeline to open, which is set to a delay. Once that's finished, it'll then teleport you to the next map. And the way it works is the player start, you name the same as the door you've gone through. So then it matches up. So like if you go through that door and then come back through it, you'll end up in the same place you went in. And vice versa, if you go through the other door, you'll end up at that location only. You know, so it makes like a one-way system or two-way system kind of thing. One issue I found with this so far is when it's packed, it spawns you in a random location and doesn't actually follow the code, but in engine, it works fine every time. Have you got anything to add to that?
No.
This next one was a fun part for me, this one was. So this one is the sewer gates, like laser fences that we got. Our modeler Harry made them, and then I added all the effects in for the lasers and the camera switch. So when you push on the button to activate this, it'll change cameras, lower the fence, and then switch back to the player again, and vice versa. And then this other one is on a delayed timer, like a random timer. So it's like meant to be like a broken one, so no switches involved. And also the switches on these are separate, so basically you can put the switch anywhere in the map that you want, and you can create like a little maze where you've got to open one switch to open the gate before you can get to the next switch to open the gate. Doing that, it made it so the player had to explore the whole sewer rather than just taking a shortcut to the exit. Next one. So this I built, wasn't technically going to be part of the game, but while I was messing around with the companions, trying to get them to work, I made these to test them on, so they could run around and I could see if the companions would shoot at them and stuff. So it's just a bit of basic patrolling. The shooting for them doesn't work properly yet, because I never got around to finishing them. But it was just a test to see, you know, if my enemy would, the companions would shoot at them and stuff, and the companions and the enemy, they have like a little firefight and stuff like that. I just never got around to actually putting the effects for the bullets and stuff like that in on the companions. But they patrol around and you get a certain distance away from them and I'll go back on their patrol again. So very basic AI, no behavioural trees involved, just blueprint coding. Next one. This is what friendly turrets. As I said about earlier with the base building, once you've activated it, like you've seen there, they start shooting at the enemy straight away because the Boolean check has been checked that it is built, and then it'll start wiping out the enemies and stuff like that. I put it there just for testing purposes, so this isn't final position in game, it's just so I could show you, it's basically setting up a scenario so you can see how they shoot at the enemy and kill the enemy. So this is the enemy turret, pretty much the same apart from it's permanently built. It was meant to be an eye turret, but basically the models had to be kept on changing because there's a mixed communication between me and the modeler. Yeah. So I wanted the base, the neck and the head separate so they could all move independently. So it was like 3 iterations of it, and then by that point I was bug fixing and ran out of time to actually implement it. So it's just got the old ones on here. That's what I wanted it like, but obviously it would have looked better than that because it would have had the proper assets. I don't know if you want to add anything about the asset creation of the delay and stuff with the mix-up.
Oh no, I was going to do that on my own.
Okay. So this is some of the traps. We wanted a tripwire trap as well, but we didn't get around to doing that. So at the moment we've got like a bear trap one there. You stand on it, it locks you in place, and then you've got to spam the button. If you delay, like say if you say you hit it 2 times and then stop, it will reset and you have to do it 3 times again, otherwise you can't get out. Once you get out, I've put a delay on it so it doesn't instantly trap you again, so like you're just permanently stuck there. So it gives you those 3 seconds just to move out of the way of the trap. And then yeah, put up a little widget just to display to the player what button you've got to push basically. It was a bit of a prompt. The next bit, I'll wait for it to get up there, which is explosions. So yeah, these barrels here, the closer you are to them, the more they hurt, but for some reason they stopped hurting you. But I set up a collision and physics blueprints that basically that's what scats you backwards, with a bit of a destructible mesh to break up the barrels and stuff. But yeah, basically it was like set up for the closer you are, the more damage you do, but somewhere along the building they broke. Right, so next slide.
Next slide.
Data pads, I believe.
Yes.
So these data pads are going to be scattered around the map. You pick them up, they basically despawn and spawn in front of you. As you notice there, I just duplicated an item, so we've got a duplicate item sheet going on here. But yeah, the way I originally wanted them done was to have the message on the actual data pad, but after discussion with the team, they wanted it just as a widget displaying the text and stuff. But we never got around to implementing that. So at the moment, it's just like you can look at the item and put it back down again. Just a quick one. Now, this one's the complicated one. This one took me nearly 3 months to build on its own. So this is a random dynamic weather system that can hurt you, all set on random timers, so you don't know where or when it's going to spawn up. So you've got 3 different effects. You've got fog, you've got rain, and then you've got the acid rain. The biggest problem I had was getting it random and also hurting the player. So I got around that by each one of these zones here. I think there's 12 in total, are trigger boxes. So when you're in that trigger box, that's if it's acid raining while you're in that trigger box, it hurts you. If you're out of that trigger box, you're fine. And that's how I got around the damage to the player. Whereas before it used to be like instant kill. It's still quite quick. It kills you in about 4 or 5 seconds, but I've turned it down from like you were just instantly dead before. But it still just needs more tweaking, more dialing down, and it would work fine. I was quite impressed on how I managed to get around that, because there's no guides whatsoever, so that was just pure brainstorming ideas until I got it to work. Right, what's this one? Level design. Right, so these are some of the key things here. Is like I wanted to do loading screens. So in the transition between levels, I wanted like a little circular loading bar in the corner, and if we had time, maybe an image, a bit like Skyrim kind of loading screen. So to do this, I used level streaming, which uses a persistent level in Unreal, which has all the levels loaded up all at once. But unfortunately, when packing the game, it broke the game. And that's also led to more breaks recently. So I tried a bit of experimentation, never done it before, maybe never again. Same with the landscape. The landscape went through so many different versions, you know. We had the first block out, and then we had another one which was a bit more advanced, and now we're on another one again now. And I think a bit more better time management and a bit more nailing down the idea at the beginning would have saved a lot of time and maybe not caused so many other delays further down the line. But you've got to learn from these mistakes and move forwards. Also, adding the assets. Basically, I should have started attaching assets to certain, like especially like smaller ones like torches. I should have attached them to the assets before placing it down to save time. But unfortunately, I placed each item down one by one, and that took quite a few hours, which just added to more delays and stuff. The only thing that I really liked about it was the lighting. I got the lighting quite nice in that game. Do you want to do the next slide?
Yeah.
So this is the overall map of the sewer. So this map doesn't show the gates on here yet because this is like early stages. So you've got Harry's tunnels here connected to brushes that are hollowed out to make the rooms. It was just quicker that way than trying to get the rooms modelled the same to match the tunnels, whereas this one you can just use minus blocking volume to get the doorways. Yeah. This is the overview of the map for the above ground. Now, this was too ambitious. It was just too big to populate. Takes 2 days to render out, so a bit more eyesight, smaller map would have saved a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure.
But you can see from this view though that it is a nice map. You know, you've got your rivers and your lakes, you know, and you've got your 2 city blocks and a bit of a shanty town there. You've got Rich's little spaceship up in orbit.
Yeah.
So it is a good map, but unfortunately for most computers it's just too big. Next slide.
Sure.
So this is a bit more of the lighting and fog, so I've got a nice still here just to show you like from the top of the skyscraper, just to illustrate some of the fog coming through the buildings and stuff like that. Next one. Right, so this is like a little video for the shanty town which we made. Originally we wanted the big city ruins and the shanty town mixed together, but unfortunately the assets weren't really made compatible with one another. So trying to put these buildings in amongst ruins, like those big city ruins, it just didn't look right. So in the end I decided to make just like a little shantytown village to, you know, make it a bit better, bit of creative freedom with the waving cat. Yeah, next one.
Okay, there's the city.
So this is like a flyby for the city to give you a bit of the view of the city. This took quite a while because all these assets were singular, all placed one by one. Even the road segments, they're all one by one placed down. Bit of hindsight, you could have attached them, saved a lot of time. But I do like the lighting through the city. The lighting and the fog inside the city is really good. I believe that's me. So what's next?
Yeah, it's me.
Thank you very much.
See, I wasn't particularly ready for character designing since I mainly invest my time into prop design. So using the base mesh that Liam created, I extruded off and made clothing for each character. This one's the pilot. I spent a couple hours touching him up, making him seem like appropriate for what the character was. And this is one of the tribal characters, using the same body, but I extruded it and made it seem more tribalish and more modern for what it actually was. I tried to maintain aesthetics of tribal and ruined clothes and try to maintain that consistency from like destroyed city and trying to keep the same design philosophy as what the concept design that I was following. And so I'm having like sandals as tribal stuff like that. So as well, I've also incorporated some sci-fi elements onto the pilot since he's a spaceman. Next one, this is Liam, characters, base model.
If you want to just play the video because I'm talking a bit.
Yeah.
Overall, the characters turned out pretty well in terms of modelling. As a result of this, the rig was worked really well due to clean topology. One thing that also worked well was the UV mapping, and this was down to learning about seams and where to place them. One area that could have been improved for all the models was probably the texturing, as it's a bit rough, but it's mainly down to time constraints. Other than that, they could have just done with like tweaks of more detail, and the detail that's on them more linked to the environments of the world. Oh, if you want to go back, you skip past Harry's. Or
Yeah, that's after.
oh, all right, my bad. All right, onto the bovine. This was our first enemy creature that we planned to include to our game. For a first attempt, it went pretty well, but it could be improved in various different ways. One thing I would change about this model is the fur on it is textured, which it doesn't really look too good. So if I was to redo it, I would make it out of hair cards if I had more time. And I think Harry's in for a quick section.
This is Harry
Quickly.
with his own character design.
So this was the robot I originally concepted along with Will. Admittedly, it did take me a long time to make, as I'm sure the group will agree, because we didn't get a chance to rig it and implement it into the game. But you can see the start on the turnable there of starting to add like relevant details to do with the character and the narrative Mike wrote. That was my first time properly using custom alphas. I just took too long to make it really, which is the only downside because it couldn't be implemented. But overall, I'm happy with it. And you can see the start of my improved UV unwraps. It's a lot cleaner. I had no real errors. The topology could be a little cleaner as well because these bits were quite difficult to make. It was quite an organic shape, so it was quite challenging to try and get that smooth flowing look. That's all about that. So I think it's Liam next again.
It's his buildings that he worked on.
So for the city area, I made modular buildings. I didn't go into much detail of the overall design, but one thing I improved with these models is the texturing, because there were so many of them, I kept it quite basic, and the lighting of the game tried to make it fit appealing because concrete textures weren't exactly working with the model, and I think that was mainly down to the unwraps, so they could have been improved on. But I also made these extra pieces to go onto the buildings, which I think in the long run I should have attached them to each mesh, and this would have saved implementation time for our coder Steve. And then here are some of the camping assets that I made. These were like key aspects of the game, but they never got implemented down to time constraints, and they're just like smaller models, so they didn't take up too much of the memory or anything.
These were also the assets that were used in the UI for the.
And then there's one more slide to show the other ones.
Yeah.
And that is all from me.
Cool. I think the next one is back to Harry talking about his models that have actual mechanics attached to them.
Yeah, so these are a selection of the models that I work with closely with Steve to make. So these are all the models that he had to implement mechanics and code onto. This was the track that Steve talked about. Had an issue with the pivots there. Steve grilled me on about that, so I learned from my mistakes. Basically, I think in Maya they were fine, but then when you imported them into UE4, it uses the origin point. So the spikes ended up going all over the place. So I learned from my mistakes there on that one. And the sewer gate went a lot more smoothly. I learned from my mistakes. I had the pivots for the lasers there as a separate object and a separate material, so you could just move them down, and Steve could add all of his mechanics to them. They were separate, so you could move them, and it also meant that Steve could edit the material, the missing material, as he mentioned. He added the laser effects and all that cool stuff. This was the keypad that went along with it. This was I was quite happy with the texturing job on this one. I really went quite detailed with it, and that acts as the key to like open these doors. As Steve mentioned, it was a separate object, so you could place it anywhere you wanted. There is an issue with bringing that into UE4. I'm not sure why, but all of a sudden all the lines go wonky. I'm not sure what causes that. I tried to fix it by like flipping the channels, adding better UV quality in UE4. Still wouldn't have it. I think it might be a UV issue, but then it looks fine in substance. Next slide. So this was the gun the enemies use. Will helped me rig it. All of the bits that had to move were separate, so you could allow for the trigger to move and the magazine to move there. The emissive material was separate, so Steve again could add his cool laser effects to it. Again, I think the only improvement I would make would be better UVs. This was before I actually took time to enhance my UV workflow, so it was quite messy, it was hard to work with, and just causes blurry textures in the finer details when this comes back around. All these sections here were just really blurry, just not good to look at. Next slide, please. So again, this was the player assault rifle, so that's the one the player's using in the game. A better texturing on this one, I think, with relevant details there, but again, the UV optimization just wasn't there, so you just end up with blurry textures really. Just overall, it could be a lot better. Implemented attachments there as well. Again, all made separately so they could move and be rigged. Next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was the shanty town huts that Steve was talking about. I instantly see better texturing on this compared to the guns. My UV optimization was a lot better this time around. I made sure all the wood UVs were organised the right way, so when I applied the wood material onto it, the grain all followed the shape of the lines of the wood there. I also followed Ben and Steve's feedback and looked into creating textures that actually fit the world, so painting dirt on the bottom of the floor that matched the terrain, and just really giving the huts a base and in the game, so they looked like they actually belonged there. These were a new addition that I had to model this year. I don't believe they were in the original level map. I think they were planned, but
they were planned, but they were never drawn on the level
so
map.
it was so I worked from Will's concepts, he threw them together, and I was able to model them from that. We didn't take into account when I modelled them the interiors, so to work with Steve's weather system. So when Will concepted them, when I was modelling them, I didn't make the interiors. So that was a bit of an annoyance. I had to go back through and hollow out the inside and then make it so you could walk inside. I also have to scale it up so the player could fit. So that was probably the hardest challenge there. I think they could have probably been a lot more detailed as well than how they were. I think I lacked quite a lot of the extra details you can see that are stuck on there. I probably could have done more of that. And again, they all could have had interiors, just mainly more complex. So I picked this one. It's kind of difficult to see down there, you can kind of just make it out. But I was looking into creating custom alphas and enhancing my texturing, so adding relevant details to Mike's narrative there. And this was one of the buildings you couldn't actually go inside, so I thought to give a subtle hint to the player in the textures, I would put no entry, a custom alpha that said no entry on the door. So it's kind of like a subtle message for the player when they walk up to it, this is one of the buildings you can't go into. And I think the next one, this one has on the door that you can go inside, so it's another subtle hint to the player that they could probably knock this door open and then walk inside. So it was just mainly making use of my better optimized UVs now, because I spent a lot of time learning how to do it properly rather than how I was doing it before. So it allowed me to add all these posters, all the decals, get really nice metal textures, and it just gave me the flexibility to then paint on the doors and just give these subtle environmental storytelling hints to the player through my textures. And yeah, there we go. Is that me?
Oh, yeah, that's you.
So Rich is going to go now, talking about more of how we create posters.
Yeah.
And from there on.
Yeah. So during the pre-production phases of the project, I was helping with the concept design, and this is one of the posters that I worked on and created. And at the time, I was still working on the 3D asset, which is the bovine canister. This bovine canister was going to be implemented into the game as both a fuel source and a drinkable item. This was recontextualized in the narrative to support the farming industry that was prevalent in the story. And this was also attached to another model that I've done that goes into the sewer level. And as you can see, I'm added some more of like a metal texture at the top of it and the bottom thing. I'm quite happy with it. In the render, it might be hard to see, but it actually glows, flashes. Will kind of helped me with that when I was texturing it. But one of the issues that I did come across was the topology at the bottom. There was quite a big end on at the bottom, so it was a bit complicated when I was texturing it. So if I was to, redo it, I'd add more of those. Also, I would have added a bit more alphas around the like bolts and stuff around the edges, because I actually modelled 3D bolts, and that could have condensed my poly count, so it'd be a lot more better, basically. This is the data pad that you saw earlier that Steve was talking about. I'm quite happy with this. I think this is probably the moment where my texturing actually started to improve. This was slightly before I did the bovine thing. But one of the issues that I did come across that I didn't really anticipate was translating textures from Substance Painter to Unreal Engine, as there's a slight differential between the emissives and the actual colouring. So in actual Substance Painter it looks a lot nicer. But in UV4 I'm quite happy with it, and I'd add a lot more if I was to go back and improve it. Yeah, but this was our collectible in the game. This is the model that I'm quite chuffed with. It's a water purifier, and it's a high poly model that I worked on. The thing that I'm quite happy with was the cloth simulation, as I started covering some of the dispensers that I created, and basically narrative designing on my model. As you can see, these little slot areas is where the bovine canisters would go. But honestly, I'm quite happy with the texturing. I think I've definitely improved here. And you've got a little bit of emissive around the generator area. And you've got the actual computer terminal. But I'm quite happy to do this, because it was like a last minute thing, because I needed to improve or add more models to my portfolio. And so I really wanted to create something that was both high poly and visually impressive. So that's one of the things that I felt like I actually did achieve. But if I was to go back and change or edit a few things, I'd probably invest more time into creating my own textures and using those as a material that I would actually use on my own models, as opposed to using the default Substance Painter designer. These are the weapons that I did the first year. They're okay. I feel like this one is definitely an improvement from this one. This was the first one I did, and the texturing is very squiffy. The second pistol, I basically took the same model from that one, and I changed the barrel to save time. But yeah, the texturing for the actual gun itself there is definitely an improvement over that. That one was rather messy. But this one I actually started adding wires and debris and miscellaneous stuff, and a couple greeblies to actually make it seem like it's an actual weapon. Again, this is one of the a few instances where I feel like I went a bit overboard with the emissives, where I started dotting emissives everywhere across the model. But yeah, it's one of the few aspects that I changed, but with that specific one I quite like, although I rarely use much alphas because this was in the first year, so I'd definitely go back and add a bit more alphas to it. Any questions for the Project Bovine? This is for the entire group to come back now, so I'm not alone.
Okay, so work experience, guys. Anything you can ask them? Anything that sort of stands out, or you think they could have done better, or anything like that? I think they could add.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah.
How much
So you got loads of testing stuff there, so it might be worth talking about it. Okay.
I mean, although I didn't really do a very in-depth look at the game, I mean, I'm sure like if I'd done more in-depth look at the game, I would have had a better feedback. But yeah, I love the concept. The modelling is really good. Yeah.
Is there anything broken or anything didn't work? Or?
I guess maybe the fog should be a little bit lighter, because I can't really see like important background elements like the ship very well. And yeah, the crosshair would be good.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're meant to be in there, just didn't have time.
Yeah.
Well, gameplay.
I mean, it's understandable if you can't do an in-depth tutorial, but that'd be good, because I didn't really, without direction, I don't think I would have known like what to do.
Yeah. It was going to be one of the main aspects in the tutorial, but if we were to go back, we definitely prioritise a lot more tutorial
Yeah,
aspects.
there's also meant to be like data logs and stuff like that
Oh, yeah.
that lead you along, which we never got around to fully implementing.
I think that might be one of the biggest issues we had as a team was prioritising key things that had to be done.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have a lot of extra stuff that is nice and makes a good game, but then
Not the bits.
we don't have the bits
Yeah.
that we don't have that we've missed out on some of the key parts, and I think that partly that's down to obviously communication, but I think all of us could have used hack and plan better in that respect.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because you
yeah,
can
yeah.
add an importance meter onto what needed to be done.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think if we used that a lot better, I think that would have helped, rather than just relying on like Discord. But we did get better with hack and plan.
Yeah,
to be
yeah, we
fair.
did.
We did get better, but we could do even better, I think, to help prioritise actually the key things that need to be done, because that is what we're missing, I think, at the end of the day.
The base checkpoint type thing is a bit far away from everything. I felt like I had to really kind of find my way back to where I was actually meant to go.
So what's
Yeah.
the purpose of the base checkpoint then?
Basically, it's just somewhere like the full-on implementation for it. It's somewhere you can go and rest, cook your food and stuff like that. But because we didn't implement the hunting to get the meat to cook, that mechanic never got put in there. And then the bed was to rest and stuff. There's also going to be a chest in there where you can store stuff and stuff like that. But
So I assume all of that affects your health and all
yeah,
that.
unfortunately, we were just the map was too big. You know, so populating it was a nightmare, which is why there's big gaps between them. The thing that takes so long to get anywhere. We could have increased the sprint speed. That would have helped a bit, so we could have run a bit quicker because the sprint and the walk weren't that much different. And then also with the base itself, that was going to just be like a central hub where you'd be safe, but it wasn't fully implemented.
Okay. From what I've seen from the presentation, the companion AI seems really good, but I didn't really see it really happen from what I played. I guess the enemy AI was a bit janky as well.
Definitely was.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Although we do know why that is.
Did you guys spot anything that stood out or anything?
I was thinking, did you ever think about expanding on your sewer map, or did like waiting 2 days for the tutorial put you off that?
Basically, with the sewer map, it's only meant to be a short level. So basically, that level, the whole purpose was to get to an area above ground that you could access from above ground. So
Yes.
yeah, and also that like when you get so far in the sewer, you'll see the final boss run past. Like it's like a bit like Resident Evil, where you see the boss run past, but you can't actually get to him yet. And then later on, you'll meet him again. So time was our biggest enemy, really.
Yeah.
If we had like more time, we would have done it better.
remember
Or
this
even,
one.
even still, maybe right at the beginning, we shouldn't have been so ambitious with everything we wanted in there. It's like we've got AI, we've got companions, dialogue, infantry, there's just so much, even base building, there's just so much we try to cram
Ambition
in.
and time.
Yeah, which basically left me to do most of the
Yeah, team
coding.
size is definitely.
And yeah, it just ran out of time really. Just it's more than what one person can do.
I think we probably could have done more like set dressing in the sewer as well to kind of make it
Oh,
look
we
a
could
bit
have
more,
done a lot
make
more.
it look a bit more complex than what it actually was, you know. Kind of, so I think there's a balance there we have to find, because we do have a few assets we could have placed in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that image
Just
there
like
that
so.
was put up wasn't the final
No,
image.
no.
If you were to play the game and go in the sewer, you'd notice that there's more gates in there. You've got the
Bovine.
water purifier.
Yeah, the water
things
purifier and the
that
bovine
we've
barrels.
done there in that map now. So from what you've seen as the picture, that was done as soon as it was assembled, rather than a finished what it is now.
Any other comment?
The UI, I mean, I can understand if it's like a placeholder at the moment, but like, it felt a bit out of place, like aesthetically.
Oh, definitely.
That's about it.
Yeah, it's pretty much a placeholder.
It was a placeholder. We did have stuff to implement into the UI, but it just came down to we just didn't have time to get round to it. It was getting the other major parts of the game working first.
And
then
you
we-
get the player character to work properly.
No, that was down to time. It's that most, as I said a minute ago, most of it is down to time constraints. Trying to do too much in about 6 months, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just a case, like I said, of prioritising those key aspects, like so we can have like at least an objective. Because we do have kind of an objective. I think if we prioritise having like,
data
it's not really streamlined.
If we prioritise like the narrative and the objectives, so the player actually has a reason to go.
If there is an incentive.
Because I think art is fine and how it looks is awesome.
Yeah.
But we need a reason for the players to actually want to go and explore this world.
Yeah.
And the only thing we have at the minute is AI. So I think in the future I'd probably reprioritise what we get done first.
Yes.
I think you've hit the nail on the head perfectly there. That's the one thing that worried me more than anything. I think, like you said, it looks fantastic. Modelling, texturing, lighting, everything looks great. But it doesn't. I've always seen it very quickly. It's hard to know what you've actually got to do.
Yeah, it's
from the start.
There's a lack of information.
So those key design elements, isn't it, or key like fundamental elements, we're kind of missing to make it a full-on experience. Just a reason to explore the world is really what we're missing.
And how do you think you could have better planned that from day one?
Like I said, we're doing better hack and plan usage. Like actually, because I think for the first 3 months we barely used it. I think we were working on a Google Drive document.
What we had to do was basically learn hack and plan before we could actually use it.
So it wasn't until January when we got it sorted we actually started prioritising.
There was only a couple of members who were actually using it, and then we eventually got to the point where we were actually using it.
So,
and recently I've also just in the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks, learned how to project a bit like a quest tracker type thing. I've only just recently learned how to do that, so that would have been another thing that could have been helpful.
I think what should have done from the start. I said was make some sort of flow chart of what had to be done.
Yeah.
In game to progress the narrative.
Game flow.
The fact that I said the data pads, that seemed like a pretty damn important thing to me to get the lore.
They were very important.
And I think that should have been done quite at the start. Okay, so who's responsible for that? Is that?
I was basically coding it to pick it up, and it's a bit of a mixed communication because I wanted the text on the data pad itself, but then they wanted it to come up as a widget.
We're going to have it on the thing with all the text. Because Michael actually did write all the narrative up for the information. Just slotting it into the...
I mean, getting the 3D... what you could have done was, like I said, the 3D thing, whatever it was, the pad, if you just swung that towards the camera, and you could have done a simple 2D graphic sort of window pointed in.
Yeah, overlay it.
That would have been the way to do it.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, that would be the easy way.
The tooltips thing, on the tutorial thing, okay? Is that implemented, is it? Is there anything like that?
Tooltips in the inventory is, but there are no other tooltips.
So, unless someone, like you said, unless someone tells you what you've got to do, there's no way a player can figure out.
Yeah, unless there's a developer right there watching you play.
Yeah.
There's not really an incentive to play.
All right.
So you can walk up to things and they'll give you a tooltip of what to do when you walk up to it, but as for narrative tooltip,
so it might be worth, not for now, for that one you've got to redo, even if it's just a screen saying what you got to do or something like that.
That's what I mean. I've just recently learned how to get a message on the side, go here and stuff like that, and do that. With checkpoints and stuff. And I've just learned that through the flight sim, but unfortunately, because of time, it's something new I learned and not enough time to put it into the Honours game.
As long as you're acknowledging it, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, the AI, that seemed to be left right down to the last minute. What was the reason for that?
No, the AI was done.
The enemy AI.
Yeah, that was done before Christmas.
Yeah.
It's just not been worked on since.
Yeah, I think that was the issue. It just needed to be fleshed out more. I think more than anything.
In what way?
So we have the one variant, which was the advanced one, but you need variation of that, to kind of add variety to it. So if they were spawned randomly, amount of in the level, I think that'd be much better. I think because at the minute we have one enemy type with one behaviour.
We've got two behaviours. We've got that patrolling one as well.
Oh, two behaviours, but so we need more I think Will, you mentioned we wanted to have a charging one, more of a crazy one.
Like what the Luke's concept.
But unfortunately, Will has been taken up with flight sim, so they never got introduced.
Okay, so from not knowing what you've been doing, what was the actual aim of the game?
The aim of the game was basically a bit like a horror mystery, so you had to go around and try and solve the mystery, basically.
And what was the
Which
what
was
was
basically for the data pads and stuff like that.
So
The
what,
mystery
so what was the mystery?
basically finding out why the bovine had gone crazy, but we
Okay.
never got to writing in the game about that narrative.
Okay, that's
The
fine.
secondary objective would also be to try and find a source of transportation off the world.
Okay, cool. Okay. And what would that be? Is that
That would have
Um,
been in the full,
yeah.
like once
That
you
would
got
be
out
the
of the
full
main
game.
area. So for the objective for what we were going to do, it was basically find your companions, like that came down with you, and then start solving the mystery, and then it would have ended with seeing the boss at the end of the game.
and what was the boss?
It was like a mix match, wasn't it?
It was going to be Luke's character.
Yeah.
It was
One
a
of the
mix of
characters.
cyborg, bovine, and engineered human bionetics, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the enemy AI, have they got an infinite sight-seeing distance? Have they?
No.
So they've got a range, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They've got a range. It's a bit janky, but they've got threat detection. So if you shoot in their direction out of their range, they know you're there. If you get into sight, yeah. Well, no, not that part. The terrain might be like the cover part, but the if you get into sight of them, they then start taking cover, shooting at you, and follow on. But it was mostly just having like a patrol thing, so they do walk around in a set area.
I just
So
found
can,
out
can,
one
can,
of
can
those-
they follow you out of that set area at the moment? They can.
Yeah,
They'll
they
let you
start in that area, and they stay in that area until you get near them or shoot at them, and then they're active, and then they do their thing to try and kill you.
Okay.
Unfortunately, these weren't very accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, there's quite a lot of stuff that seemed quite important to me that was left out. Also, the data pads, the hunting and the chopping trees. That seemed quite important. I don't know.
Yeah,
Basically, the hunting was semi-important. I wouldn't say it was important as in like game-breaking important, because the way I did that is basically for health, the hunting was. But with his jars that he did, I turned them into health things, so you'd pick them up and you could use them as health instead. So although I took away the eating and the drinking, we didn't have a thirst bar, so drinking wasn't the importance. And as for the food, that just got swapped with drinking those canisters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Okay. I really like the loot mechanic and the inventory system. That's really, really nice. Is there a set amount of stuff you can store on the inventory?
Yes.
There is,
Yeah.
yeah. So what happens when you meet it?
It won't put nothing in it, you won't pick it up. It'll just
Okay.
stay on the floor.
Okay. Scan looks awesome, really like that. Base building, I think all the buildings look great. Okay. Holograph looks well. I like the way it activates once you've got it. I think that's really cool. The gun. There were streaming issues. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, Steve?
The level streaming issues, yeah. Basically, I wanted loading screens, and the guide I found for it to get these loading screens in without using C++, which is what I wanted to do. It guided me through it and everything, and it all worked in engine, so it streamed from one level to the next level, and loading screens would pop up, and it was all fine. But the issue came when you packed it to test it. It would just load you in the middle of nowhere and you couldn't see nothing. And then because of that issue, I thought I solved it, because I got rid of it, play tested it again on the computer, and it was fine. But what I didn't do is pack it and test it. I just tested it in engine, which I should have packed it and tested it. So later on in development, like, I don't know, 2 months into this second term, when it did finally get packed, I noticed that that error was still there because it left something behind. I'm not that versed with how the map data next to the map file works, so if I knew maybe how to break into that and look into that, I might have been able to find a way of fixing it. But the easiest solution, which I found, was to build the map again, and that's what I'm in the process of doing.
Okay, so Harry and Mike, obviously there's a lot of texture involved in there, and UV unwrapping, and trying to get the textures to create a narrative or help drive the narrative. Okay, is there any way you think you could have improved that?
I think more variety, I think, would be nice. Like we had limited posters and stuff to work with, so like more of that, and just go deeper into the narrative as well. I think with what we were doing, because I only just started doing that on the buildings, and I think it only come about after finding out about the interiors. So it was kind of like a last minute spur of the moment. It wasn't technically planned, you know. So it was just more detailed versions of it, and just more of it, I think, would be nice. Again, it's just a case of making sure your UVs are perfect. Otherwise, you can't really do it. Because I mean, it happened on one of the larger buildings, I think, because the building's bigger, it gets blurrier when you get closer. So it literally is a key of prioritising your density of your UVs. Otherwise, it just won't work. So I think just be more mindful of that in the future, I think.
So that would be a good idea. It's like a blueprint document where you state, like, you know, how close you're actually going to get to something, and that would drive how big the resolution of those textures should be.
Yeah, I think we should also spend a little bit longer in the planning phase to plan out a bit more of what everything's going to be. It's like some of
and
like
standardised it.
Yeah,
like I said, I did it
because
as
some
a
of the map
moment.
design, like I talked in the presentation, like that big open world, it got recreated 3 times. You know, it's just wasted time that we should have knocked out of the way right at the beginning.
We didn't actually have it towards other ones, yeah.
Okay, so Mike, and just Mike, is there any way you think you could have sped up the texturing process to implement the actual textures, telling a story of where they've been and aging and that sort of stuff? You think of a way I could
the reason why it took so long was because I was using much more of a manual kind of workflow instead of like smart masks and generators. I'm much more used to creating material, smart masks, generators, stuff like that, and kind of modifying it until it looks good. This time I decided to look a lot more at referencing and doing actual manual brushwork on the models, so that it actually looks a lot more realistic and better, instead of like, hey, like, we're going to pour a bunch of gasoline on this, light it on fire, and then throw everything in the forest at it. So actually, you know, it tells much more of a story than just.
So Steve, in relation to that, is there any way you think you could have might be able to speed up the whole
It's really
process?
just practice, really. The more practice you get, the faster.
What I'm talking about is actually sort of like, you know, the models look great, the texturing look great. When you put them into the actual environment, you almost look out of place. How do you think they could have sorted that out a bit better?
In what degree, sorry?
So when you just say one of those buildings, you plumb into the terrain.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything you could have maybe used to help blend in terrain to the asset, to tell a bit more of a story?
Well, looking at the environment that it's actually supposed to be based in.
Yeah.
So you can get an indication of colours. You can get an indication of like if people are going to be kicking mud on it, or if rain's falling on it, it's metal. Is there going to be rust on it, stuff like that?
Okay. And what about level design? How do you think you might be able to help out with that?
Yeah, foliage.
Yeah,
Okay.
I could have
Much
followed
more
that
materials.
map, but the assets didn't match.
One thing, I was thinking, I'm trying to get, well, can anyone else think of anything that could have sped it up? Or maybe blended in the actual assets into the terrain a bit better?
Probably added more mega scans.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything else?
Pixel mixer.
Yeah, anything else?
Like mundane items.
Yeah,
Like,
vertex painting.
yeah.
Okay, because what you basically could have done, you could have add your textures from your assets in there. Yeah, you could have added a mega scan grass or a mega scan sand to that. Okay, make that whole thing a blend material. Okay, then you could literally puncture your hut or whatever, and then literally vertex painted the grass inside that, so it matches the ground perfectly.
Trouble is though, doing that would have been good, but I had too much mechanics.
No, I'm just saying, yeah.
I just had too much mechanics.
You have a lot to do on your own, basically. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at. That's why I asked for you.
Trouble is, see, like with all these Unreal projects, it's one person at a time.
Yeah.
So if I'm coding, no one else can use that file.
Yeah.
So, and I spent pretty much the first 2 months of this year just coding.
I know. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Through this, doing this.
Yeah,
Okay.
it all goes back down to we're too ambitious. For
Yeah.
a small team like we are, we're just too ambitious.
Well, I think as a whole, we could probably share that over a little bit better. Maybe a little bit better. Yeah. Like the cloth simulation stuff.
Yeah, I was rich, on that one.
Really good, like that. So how did you do that?
In Max, what I basically did is create a plane and show.
That's just the cloth.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
It's the same as the cloth on the bed that...
Did anyone try doing it in UE4?
Oh no, I had no idea.
Not on this project, I did.
No, we
I did it on the other
well.
project.
Did it? Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
what-
did it with that flag with the triangles cut out of it, like the blue thing from the Jolly.
Cool. Good.
So that's all cloth simulated, affected by the wind and stuff.
So it would have been nice, I was saying, on the building, or buildings house, you've got that stuff moving about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be quite
I
nice.
just wish we had more time.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, yeah.
Yeah, I think that could have been something I've done, because obviously it's quite stacked, isn't it? I just kept it low poly, but yeah, you could have done that, I think, in UE form.
Okay. Yeah, I think overall pretty good. I think, like I said, I think that the main big thing more than anything was, what's the point of the game?
Narrative.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the main thing that really shines out for me. They spot it straight away.
Yeah.
So when you rebuild it,
Yeah.
it makes some really, idiot-proof in there. So you know what we've got to do.
It's like go to city.
Yeah, I just do that.
Something simple as that would have made it more
Doing
simple.
that's easy. isn't it?
Yeah.
So what you want to do right at the start is there's some sort of flow chart saying what you have to do to go where or whatever.
Yeah.
Concentrate on getting that right first, and then worry about what it looks like next.
Yeah. I can also set up barriers and stuff like that to
Yeah.
stop the player going certain places and stuff like that, and then when they reach an objective, that unlocks and they can then go that way. So
Okay.
doing that is easy. Just I maybe prioritise things wrong, but I just had lots of mechanics to get done, and that's what I prioritised to get these mechanics in.
Yeah. I think you did what you had to do. What I'm saying is to improve it.
Yeah. There's lots of narrative that needs like data pads. You find out with some notes, like it's like. A little bit like Elden Ring at the moment, it doesn't point you in what direction to go. It gives you lots of little hints and stuff through dialogue and visuals and stuff like that, it's like, oh, what's that over there, and go and explore it.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, overall, I thought it was excellent, to be honest with you. Really, really good. Okay, like I said before, I think that's the best honours one we've had since we started the course by a long way. Okay. All right. Okay.
That's the best.
Okay. Content. What the thing that let me know all in the past pretty much is just a lack of 3D content, and that's full of it. It's really good. Okay. All right. Mechanics are brilliant. Acid rain, excellent. The animals are really, really good. The texture is brilliant. Okay. The only thing that let it down is just that whole narrative thing, basically.
I think it was all focused, like the modelers were focused on their models and cracking them out.
I think everyone got a little bit blinkered on what they're doing.
Yeah.
They got that whole picture.
I was like focused on getting game mechanics in.
I think that's where, I'll say it's Richard's fault. I think that's where the sprints and the scrums could have come in and said, right, what are we doing here?
Yes, boss.
Okay, all right. Okay. I think that not using hack and plan to the extent links to that a little bit.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
I say we've got better at it with the other project, and I think it shows.
Yeah.
Because we've got, we had most of the key elements done, and we had it all prioritised with the urgency thing you can set. So I think that if we use that from the start, I think we spent like the first 3 months just talking on Google Drive and Discord and stuff.
But did you notice after a while, I don't know if it seemed like it to me, that the use of Discord went down as hack and plan went up. And I thought that was really good.
Well, I think we stopped
hack and
doing
plan-
voice meetings and stuff, didn't we? We stopped.
Well, I think we stopped doing voice meetings because we had to do it every Wednesday.
There was also, we Scrum meeting wise as well, we dropped that off quite a lot as well because there was literally no need for it because we
Well,
all
I
knew
think,
what we were
I think
doing.
that demonstrated that hack and plan was actually working because of that. That was a good indicator for me that that's actually working. So that was really good.
Most of the Discord meetings were like when we had presentations or stuff, it was like things we actually needed to talk together with. So.
Like I said, our Scrum meetings we barely did. We just kind of got on with it now. We could come in here and we knew what everyone was working on. I knew Rich was doing the Spitfire, I knew Steve was coding this, Mike was working on that, just because you could put your name by it. So yeah, I think that would be the key for the future.
Really good. Okay, brilliant guys, well done. That was really good.
Thank you.
Good. All right, having a proper break now, yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.